Pokemon HeartGold and Soul Silver were the last time Pokemon really felt like an adventure to me. I'm not ragging on the later games, I played up through Generation 6, but after Gen 4 they sort of lost something, I think. This thing was just so magical, especially how it came in that big box with the Pokewalker. Yeah, the Pokewalker, remember? Those things most kids lost immediately at school? It's a cool little device, really helped elevate the game's identity, but even without it, the game's still a great time. The intro itself is so enchanting, and all the game's music is so great. Oh, quick aside, gonna be focusing on Heart Gold as that's the one I personally had, and just sort of conjoining it with Crystals since it carries a lot over from it. So I'm gonna be using the terms Gen 4 and Gen 2 interchangeably a lot. Man, Oak looks so cool in that blazer, what a legend. I like how he's all like, oh, your name is Monkey? Yeah, it is, no need to be all polite, man. I love the wind blowing at the beginning here, really brings that sign's words to life. Lyra's an alright character, she doesn't really make things worse or anything, I just think she's sort of one note. Chris's design has also been on my mind while playing, and I do think I prefer it to Lyra's. Anyway, walking with your Pokemon is so cool, and I didn't realize until coming back to it just how much it really does strengthen your bonds with them. While I love the Sinnoh games, I think they more feel like a mountain you're climbing, like something to be conquered, while HeartGold feels what I would describe as most like the anime, venturing out to see the world and make friends with your Pokemon, emphasized by the focus on walking and talking with them. They even have specialized interactions in certain areas, and I think all this works so well because of how realized this world is. I think this is the best the series has ever looked visually. The slight improvements from Platinum I think pop in a really pleasing way. I think further down the line they got too fixated on making as many places 3D modeled as possible, while this feels more natural to me. Johto is a region with a lot of older locations and a rich history, and that contrasted with the sleekness of the UI comes together very nicely, especially since they're so separated. It really brings the remaking a classic element to life. I love the menus in this game, they're so cool with the model of your character on screen. It's sorta lame each page only has 6 items on it though. I also think the option to just have the running shoes on or off was a great choice. Nice quality of life thing, and it looks really nice on the touchscreen. The game's visuals are also gorgeous, it's honestly just one of the nicest looking DS games in general. Mr. Pokemon is also still a hilarious name to me, probably a nickname. Heading back to Newbark though, you run into the rival, Silver. He's my favorite rival in the series, and it was refreshing back then to have another rival that's actually like a rival, you know? After Gens 1 and 2, the series shifted to making the rivals your friends, and even did so right after this. Not sure what they're like now, the last new game I played was X, but in that time frame it was nice to have him back, as his disdain for the player actually makes all the times he battles you feel like something a rival would really do, as opposed to being a friendly catch-up session. In the original games, he said his name was here, but it slightly changed so that he drops his card and you see it. Back when I was a dumb kid though, I thought this was just actually his name and answered the cop by saying it was, and I think a lot of kids ended up doing that actually. I ended up naming him Luca this time around, which I'll explain later. Up further on this route, there's the Dark Cave, which I think is the first time you can see one of these illustrations that were done for some notable areas, which were also done back on the GBA for the Kanto remakes. These are all so beautiful, and it's really cool they went out of their way to add flourishes like this. I can't imagine they didn't take a lot of time to do, and you can just skip them in a second, it's crazy. So much effort, and they even change depending on the time of day you see them. I really enjoy the day-night mechanics. The games have a really robust time system with lots happening each day, and only certain times you can rematch certain trainers on specific days depending on who it is. But there are also recurring radio shows, the Safari Zone, which we'll come back to, and the Apricorns, which respawn daily. You can tell they really took the day-night system seriously too, with how punishing the games can be if you mess with the clock. You can even use the radio in sync with the day-night cycle to find Pokemon from different regions. They really leaned into the life simulation elements with the Gen 2 games, and it's something I feel I really couldn't appreciate when I was like 10 when these games came out. They really did want you to live in this world and get to know its people. Like, for example, west of Violet City there's this guy who has the HM for Rock Smash. It's not required, but it's a major item and they just give it to some guy for you to find. It makes everyone feel important. Also, speaking of Violet City, this music is insane. Getting to the first gym, the game really sets the precedent here that these remakes were not phoned in. This is a big event. While the first gyms in these games tend to be more on the humble side, this one is huge and epic, way up in the air. And I think the super elevated presentation, with the actual layout not being mega different, really highlights what they wanted to achieve with these, maintaining the spirit of the old ones while definitively bringing them into the present. And what's ironic is how in doing this, these games don't feel dated, they still look and feel great. While they were trying to push the system more, it wasn't done as a set piece to show off, it's all done in service to the story. They also full-on revamped many of the gyms, which I welcome, as some of the original ones were really limited by the hardware, and often weren't much more than a room of trainers. There are a couple they didn't touch at all though, and we'll get to that later. It's always been funny to me, by the way, that the first gym gives you the Zephyr badge, a word no kid knew how to say. To this day, I always use it to annoy people while playing Hangman because of this game. The game introduces eggs here and the Kimono Girls. I like how the eggs hatch by you walking, and I know that was pre-walking with your Pokemon, but it still all ties together so neatly. Fresh out of the first gym though, the modernizations to the world don't stop there. Like, I love how Goldenrod's magnet train runs above this route. It makes the region feel more interconnected. Well, before, I think, the original Pokemon games could feel somewhat just like a collection of towns at times. One of my absolute favorite parts of this game though, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, one of the best things I think they did with this game was introduce the modernized Pokemon centers. I don't know if this seems stupid because I've met others who feel the same way. The redesigns of these places to be more vertically oriented with the stairs on either side, it feels so open and relaxing. These are some of the buildings you visit the most throughout this game, so this decision to give them this upbeat, lively atmosphere, remixing the music, I think it really breathes even more life into them. Sinnoh's Pokemon centers had a more cozy feel to their layout, which really worked for those games' many harsh and cold climates, but in the more temperate region of Johto, this keeps things really light. Again, it reminds me of the anime. They did this for the Pokemarts too, to a lesser extent, making them a bit bigger and also having one of the best songs in the soundtrack, which is saying something for this game. They remind me a bit of Nook and Go from City Folk, especially with the spinning sign. Getting to Azalea Town, this is where Team Rocket marks their comeback, taking over Slowpoke well. And this is actually where I start to have some issues. Not with the sequence, that's fine. Just Team Rocket in general. In Red and Blue, they were a perfectly good and serviceable antagonist, and thwarting them was fine. I mean, the headquarters sorta sucks, but it was fine. For this game though, it's just them again, this time without Giovanni, which is disappointing as he was sort of the really cool part about them, being the big bad mafia boss. This time though, they're just sort of hoping he'll come back the whole time. They seem sort of aimless. And I don't know if this is the point or not, as they're still portrayed as like a major threat, but it just leaves some to be desired. Afterwards, Kurt can start making you Pokeballs, but only one kind per day. Again, really pushing those real-time elements on you, which isn't a problem, it's just that Azalea is a bit of a remote location in the grand scheme of things, and the player is still a ways off from getting Fly, so it's just a bit inconvenient to really take advantage of at this point. This rival battle always annoyed me as a kid, as I always chose Totodile and had a Geodude, so I was just never equipped to deal with his starter, and I never used any buffing or debuffing moves. Platinum was my first or second RPG altogether, so I didn't really understand that concept yet. It was a bit foreign to me, so I thought they were just turn wasters basically. Same with type matchups, I think the only one I really understood back then was water beating fire. These are meant to be for kids though, as introductions to the genre, which is why I find it so funny how relentless the next gym leader is at just obliterating you. Anyway, in the Ilex Forest is the Forest Shrine, which was always so cool to me. It has a mysterious aura about it, but now just kind of reminds me of how much of these games' content is just locked away now. All these cool events with no way to access them without hacking. It's better than the Sinnoh games were with this, but it's still disappointing, and a lot of them have pretty important story information too. It's really a bummer. I never even got to experience a lot of it. My parents weren't taking me to GameStop or wherever to do these events, so a lot of this stuff is really mythical to me. The big one I feel like I missed out on were the Sinjo Ruins, which you need a special Arceus to trigger, and I don't really want to hack or cheat to do it. It sort of sucks the magic out of it for me. The forest also lets you learn Headbutt, which is cool. It lets you hit trees to find some rarer Pokemon, but you can also find Sleeping Hoothoots, which is cute. Them being nocturnal. It's little details like that bring the world to life. I know a lot of stuff like that I've been praising is more owed to Crystal, but I don't care. This is also around when the game introduces the daycare and breeding mechanics. Breeding in these games is something I've never gotten all that into, and feels something more for people trying to build good competitive teams, as it's nowhere near necessary to get through the main story. It does have a lot of depth, I just don't find it overly interesting, which is a theme that'll come up a couple more times. Goldenrod may be my favorite city in a Pokemon game. It feels so lively. I love how you have to go and find Whitney in order to get her to go to the gym. You have to explore this place. You can also start taking pictures with your Pokemon at this point, which is easily one of the best additions to any of these games. It's another thing that feels like the anime. And I'm by no means suggesting the anime did everything right, but one thing it did get was that sense of growth as a team. And this plays directly back into the overarching theme of your relationship with your Pokemon being at the center of everything. It's a literal family photo album. It's just perfect. There's also the Game Corner, home to one of the worst minigames in the series. It's basically Minesweeper, but there's even more luck involved. Even using those code-cracking websites, it still took me a while to get all the coins I needed. It used to be slots, but standards had changed by this point. Beyond the city, there's National Park, which hosts bug catching contests twice a week, and the Pokeathlon. Bug catching is alright, there are some nice prizes which can be helpful. They give out evolutionary stones, and Growlithe is available right on the route next door. It's okay. The Pokeathlon is new to the remakes and is basically a minigame hub. You can compete with any of your Pokemon who all get stats in different categories for different types of events, and you can compete against other teams, sort of like Mario Party, adding some randomness into. You earn points from them, which can also be used to buy items and Evo stones, but to be frank, most of these minigames are not fun at all. They're not terrible, but they all feel a bit like a chore. You can set new records, and breaking them all gets you into the Hall of Fame and a star for your trainer card, and I'm serious when I say this. This is why I didn't 100% the game for this review. I got so little enjoyment from doing this, I decided not to try for the 5 stars altogether. I was considering completing the national dex, and this is what stopped me. It's not bad, but it is really dull and very repetitive. After you water then battle Sudowoodo, the game really opens up. It's been on sort of a rail up to this point, but once you do this, you have both a path back to Violet City, and are able to produce the next 4, count 'em, 4 gyms in whatever order you want. I see a lot of praise for the game becoming so open at this point, but it was really just following suit. Gen 1 did the same thing. While we're right here, let's go over to the Ruins of Alph. This was something I never knew what to do with as a kid, but coming back, it's a cool little mystery side quest, and by the end you have to catch all 28 Unknown, which have always been a cool Pokemon to me. It adds a lot of cool lore to the region, even if it can be a bit tedious with you having to run through Union Cave so many times and wait for the right Unknown variants to show up. I really liked it though, it was relaxing and a mindless thing to waste some time doing. I've seen some people complain doing this doesn't give you a proper reward for completing the Unknown report, but you get 16 items across the puzzles, many of which are great hold items, so I think that's a bit of a short-sighted assessment. I know I just ragged on the Pokeathlon for not being fun, then praised a side quest where you do one thing 4 times and another nearly 30 times, but I think this appealed to me more because it's built around the core functions of the game, that is, exploring, getting invested in the world, and catching Pokemon. I think it works. Back on the main path, the next city is Ecruteak, which really fleshes Johto out, with the Burn Tower introducing the legendary beasts and the Bell Tower where a legendary Pokemon once rested. I love that this effectively becomes the hub of the region for the player, though I think they more intended for Goldenrod to be. Ecruteak I feel is a better show of what the region is all about though, especially with all the Japanese-inspired elements. You can get the dowsing machine here, which helps find hidden items. Again, they really wanted you slowing down and exploring every inch of this place. Luke also shows up here, which is always welcome. Again, he's probably my personal favorite of the series rivals. He has a great design. Eugene comes from Crystal, and he's alright. He's never been one of my favorite characters, but I guess they found it really necessary to have a character to go, "Look, that's Suicune!" The introduction of the beasts is something I genuinely think Crystal did better though. It was sort of like they were statues coming to life, while here it just sort of looks like they're hanging out at the clam. I really like Morty's gym. I think it's a lot more fun with the lights going out than a black carpet was. You can tell they were worried about a ghost gym being too difficult for people though. Back in Gen 2 it was still tricky to deal with, so they just plopped his weakness right outside the city for you to destroy him with. Morty's a cool character though, I just wish they gave him a little bit more to actually do. He has an interest in their history and wants to prove himself worthy of meeting the legendary Pokemon at the Bell Tower, but just sort of accepts when you beat him, "Guess not." Despite becoming so open, the game is sort of expecting the player to go west and take on Cianwood and Olivine's gyms next, before Mahogany's, but I decided when in Rome and tried out the other path. Mahogany Town is another one of my favorite locations in the game. It's so cozy. The red Gyarados is really cool. I think everyone agrees this is one of the highlights of the main story. Any time when a Pokemon you battle is on the overworld is just really special. It's also an easy way for newer players to get an easy team member who works well fresh out of the water. After you meet Lance, who's also cool, with him you storm the Rocket hideout in town. And see, this is what I mean. It sort of feels like a retread of Red and Blue, invading their underground base. What's next? Fighting them as they take over a large building in a metropolitan area? Really though, this is an okay section. It just sort of feels monotonous. It's like a half hour of fighting the same 2 to 3 Pokemon. I get you want to engineer some predictability into the Grunt's parties so the player can prepare to some extent, but I don't see why like Rattata, Ekans, and Koffing have to be the only designated bad guy Pokemon. Isn't Team Rocket's thing that they steal them from people? You can keep them easy battles if you want, but it would literally make more sense for them to have more diverse teams. Not a single one of them kept a Slowpoke. The whole Olivine Cianwood section has always seemed a bit convoluted to me. Not in like some sort of dumpster fire way, but it sort of feels like it keeps going on more and more tangents. You're trying to find Jasmine, you're trying to get the medicine, you're surfing to Cianwood, you face a different gym, you see Suicune and battle Eugene, then the Safari Zone opens, all this before even getting back to what you were doing in the first place. This all does effectively act as the Olivine gym though, like the journey is the puzzle to solve. You also get Fly after the gym, which helps expedite the process of getting back. The Cianwood gym is great, and both of the bosses are fun too, but I really want to talk about the Safari Zone for a minute. The Safari Zone was always an obstacle to me. In Gen 1, it was where you got Surf and the Dentures, maybe a Mon or two. In HeartGold and Soul Silver though, it's crazy. First, to get there, you travel through this new route with really great atmosphere and music. Then you get there and have to do some errands, which by the way take 3 in-game hours minimum to complete. Once you do though, it's yours. You're the owner, in name only though, you still gotta pay to get in. The Safari Zone works differently here than in other games though. First, there's no step limit, which is an immediate improvement in my book. Second, it can be customized for your convenience and clearly define which encounters are where. I found myself frequently coming here just to hang out. It's really relaxing and you can find some cool Pokemon here. The big thing though is the objects. Having certain ones or amounts in each section attracts different kinds of Pokemon, some really good ones too, as well as from different regions. The catch though is this is all done in real time, meaning you have to wait for them to come. How long? Well, what seems reasonable? A few hours? A day? Sometimes yes, but how about for the stuff you really want? Riolu, Gibble. Try 70 to 100 real-life days. I get they really wanted you to live in this world, but I am not moving in. 40 days for Buizel. It has a lot of depth, and I still think it's the best version of the Safari Zone of the ones I played, but they grossly overestimated the attractiveness of Bronzong. I know there's all this optimization that can be done, and someone even solved time travel in these games, but I don't like doing that. It feels like it's betraying the point of what the designers were trying to do. Screw Voltorb Flip though, I'll cheat on that all day. They also didn't account for how the objects would appear at night, so you get these SADX looking ones. All that said though, it's nice there is a way to catch much more Pokemon than the original games. One of the biggest points of contention with GCS was how many new Mons were locked away from the player, and this helps to remedy that, but the remakes in general mended this issue. There are now only like 7 or so Johto Pokemon you have to wait a long time for. I still think that's too many, but there were steps taken. After some story events, Professor Elm calls and lets the player know there's a problem in Goldenrod. There, Team Rocket has, you guessed it, taken over a large building. Something that was added in the remakes is you have to actually dress up as a Rocket Grunt to get past the first floor, going undercover. I always remembered this as one of the standout moments of the game, but it's actually way shorter than I remembered. You get dressed, go to the stairs on the first floor, and that's it. Like, not counting goofing around, talking to NPCs, the sequence lasts maybe 2 minutes. I guess it just left a really big impression on me, and seemingly many. I feel like this is one of the most talked about sections of the game. This time around, you go up, then get sent to their underground hideout, again, where you get jumped by your rival. I've got to mention this too. I love how you constantly get ambushed by him. You see him several times, but it seems he only challenges you to a battle when you're not expecting it. I love it. During this whole Rocket takeover, you fight some Rocket executives, and I feel like this highlights my disappointment in their inclusion. I get the sort of idea they're going for is how disorganized they are, without a proper leader, but it just feels like the same but less to me. Like they're doing the building takeover again to attempt to reach Giovanni, and it just comes across as so pathetic, yet the game doesn't treat it like that. They still give Team Rocket this oppressive, intimidating tone that they had in Red and Blue. It's not that I don't like them or even think they shouldn't have been included, but I wish their role was changed up more. You also battle one of the most hilarious teams in Pokemon boss history with Petrel, sporting a wheezing, then 5 identical coughings. Hilarious. Archer's a pretty cool boss though, now being named instead of just being an executive. I also tried out Let's Go Eevee after this and found they actually retconned an old Rocket executive to be him, which is a nice touch. His Houndoom can be tricky if you don't have the type coverage for it. The other executives aren't bad or anything, but they really didn't leave much of an impression on me, just sort of seemed like generic bad guys. Afterwards, you get the Rainbow Wing in HeartGold or the Silver Wing in Soul Silver. Completing this and the first 7 gyms opens the path to the next city with the 8th. I like Ice Path, it's a nice change of pace, and I actually always enjoy Pokemon's ice sliding puzzles, I find them relaxing. At the end is a Kimono Girl, which the player has seen several of throughout their journey so far. I like them too, in that they're an addition that adds to the Japanese theming of Johto. On the other side is Blackthorn City, and it's cool the town with the last gym sort of brings you full circle directly north of New Bark, again like Red and Blue in a good way, where the final gym is the first one you see. There isn't a ton to do here though, pretty small for a city. The gym specializes in dragon types, and I haven't mentioned it until now, but it's really cool every gym in the region is one that didn't have a gym in the Kanto games. No repeats, it keeps it fresh, especially if someone's playing them in order. This is a great final gym too, as Dragon is easily one of the hardest types to deal with, as the region doesn't have a ton of good ice types, very few dragon types that can be obtained by this point, and even if you do have the means to combat them, they're still really tough. Claire is probably my favorite gym leader of the series. She's super cool and has a great design. She's an awesome boss too, her team doesn't hold back. I think this was the only gym leader who I actually came close to losing to, but for some of the wrong reasons, which we'll come back to. You get this little fake out scene where she refuses to give you the badge, then runs to the dragon's den. And returning to a point from earlier, I love how realized this world feels, and everyone around here specializes in dragon types because of the monks training at the den, which is also a cool location. It's this little isolated underground cave with nothing but a platform with the shrine on it. And here you take this little test with the monks to see if you're ready for the Pokemon League. And as long as you're not an idiot, you'll get the go-ahead from them, forcing Claire to concede and give you the badge. Going back though, the Dragon Elder, again if you didn't screw up the test, will give you a Dratini with extreme speed. A really nice reward for the player's efforts. I really love how, in a sense, the real final test of getting the badges is a trial of the player's relationship with their Pokemon. It plays so well into the story, and again, with being able to do so much more with your Pokemon directly now, gives this great sense to the finality of this chapter of the game. You get a call to head back home, which is a really pleasant romp down Route 46, all upbeat, and it brings you right back to the first route of the game. It's just so bittersweet, it makes me all fluttery. And it leads right into Elm giving you the Master Ball and saying the mysterious Kimono girls want to see you in Ecruteak. I think the day-night cycle also really shines here in framing an emotional angle to these scenes. I did this all right as night broke, and it all just felt so perfect. I think this happened the first time I played this too, I just can't imagine this happening any other way. In Ecruteak, you run into the rival who says they just kicked his butt, which I laughed at before facing my first loss of this entire playthrough. They each have a different evolution, which is fun, and yeah, let's talk about Eevee for a second. You can get one from Bill pretty easy around the midway point, and I love how this region's signature Eevees, Espeon and Umbreon, are the ones players will be most likely to get, with how hard to come by evolution stones are in the main story, which I think was intentional to put even more emphasis on the friendship and happiness mechanics. After beating them, this leads into the big climb up the bell tower, which you're finally allowed into, having the Rainbow Wing and the Clear Bell. It's also dramatic, and when you finally get to the top, you get this magnificent cutscene where Ho-Oh descends onto the roof of the bell tower, like top shelf Kino. Like, this is some of the most beautiful pixel art I've ever seen, and it all blends so well with the simple 3D shapes they've integrated into the landscapes. It's a fun battle too, with some challenge, and the Master Ball is an option too, in case a player wants an easy out. I can see doing that if you think this is like your only chance or something, but I could never waste my Master Ball on the box legendary, and anyone who doesn't save before fighting a legendary anyway is insane to me. In Soul Silver, this is where you'd encounter Lugia and the Whirl Islands, but I don't know, even now, I think Ho-Oh Way in the Sky feels like a much more tonally appropriate climax to this part of the game. It just feels so right, being at the top of a tower after having conquered all the region's gyms. After the battle, it's time to head for the Pokemon League. Surfing out of New Bark, the player gets to Route 27 and is informed they've just stepped into the Kanto region. This blew my mind as a kid, and I want to talk more about it a bit later, but the idea of the game suddenly being like, hey, you're back where this all started was really special. You battle through the route and eventually reach Victory Road, which is pretty straightforward compared to Red and Blue's, which I'm thankful for. I was never a fan of that one. And at the end, you get jumped by the rival once more. Fun battle, not too tough. I think ironically I'd say it's a bit of a victory lap. With that, the player finally arrives at the Indigo Plateau and probably gets their butt kicked by the first member of the Elite Four since he's a psychic user with Pokemon all like 8 to 10 levels higher than you, most likely. So, like, what is this about? Credit where credit is due, they did well at balancing the areas in the mid-game, so you really can do gyms 4 through 7 in any order you want, but it does have its drawbacks. The most common criticism I see about these games is the balancing problems in the latter half. The game's difficulty basically flatlines around the midpoint, as to accommodate for the openness, you'll mostly be running into Pokemon between the levels of like 18 to 26, give or take. It's fine at first, but eventually just isn't enough XP to sustain the player's growing team. Then suddenly, just after this, they get hit with probably 3 or 4 instances of the enemy's Pokemon out of nowhere being 8 to 10 levels higher than theirs. And this isn't the part where I tell you, actually it doesn't, but I'm not going to pretend like the game gives the player 0 options for overcoming this either. Rematches with the trainers scale to where the player is in the game, so it isn't like you're going to be fighting nothing but level 15 Sentrons trying to claw your way out. These trainers, also having consistent teams, allow the players to effectively EV train their Pokemon if they want, allowing for the remaining level gaps to be somewhat negated, as well as allowing the player to buy stat boosting items in Goldenrod. On top of this, the player has access to the daycare, where they can train Pokemon simply by doing anything else. The life sim elements really shine here in particular, letting you level up as you're collecting berries, picking up Pokeballs from Kurt, or whatever else. However, I think all these mechanics do suffer from a conflict of interest on the designer's parts. I think rematching trainers would be a great remedy for this problem, as trainers inherently give more experience than wild encounters, but everything is on such specific time restrictions it's difficult to know who is available when, unless you keep track yourself or have some sort of calendar guide, which I think really sucks the fun out of feeling like you're using all the mechanics to your advantage. Trainers call U2 for rematches, but not nearly enough to make up for this gap. Second, even if you get past this hump, though you can EV train your team with this method, I think it's frankly unreasonable to expect the average casual player to understand how those work, or even what they are. Which I think is an issue because that seems to be who they really wanted to appeal to, with all the strides made to slow the pace down. This leaves the daycare as the most viable option, which, when you have a team of 4 to 6 Pokemon, is also not super efficient. I'm not trying to needlessly bash here, I just think the methods employed aren't overly effective or satisfactory, which is unfortunate in what is such a great game otherwise. All this said, however, I didn't end up doing that much grinding, maybe only an hour to an hour and a half. My team was in the mid to high 30s when I arrived, and I got them all to around level 45. The Elite Four champion's strongest Mon tops out at level 50, so that makes it more than possible and still pressed me sometimes. Will is a good litmus test for players, I think. If you can beat him, you probably have a good chance of making it at least a decent ways into the Elite Four, with Psychics being a good type to make sure the player is at least employing some strategy by this point. Really cool to see Koga again too, especially upon the reveal you're in Kanto now. Seeing he's ascended from his position as a gym leader is neat, and it really helps to sell that time has passed since those games' events. Bruno has always felt like the guy who got into the Elite Four on accident. He seems like a nice guy, but has several types that are just so easy to counter and have several common weaknesses. After him is Karen, who is my personal favorite member of this Elite Four. She specializes in dark types, and I think it's so funny how her battle starts out all nice and playful, then things just suddenly shift once Houndoom comes out. She just keeps buffing, then will sweep your party if you let her. Buffs and debuffs have been there up to this point, but no boss has gone super in on them, then suddenly, boom, she's even one-shotting your water types. I just like that they don't pull their punches, they're really trying, and I think it makes for a more natural transition into the tone the rest of the game's battles are going to take, and believe me, there are much more than these in the champion left. They just all really try and push you except Bruno. After them, it's finally time for the champion, Lance. It's always so funny to me how he has 3 Dragonites, it's so overkill. Luckily, though he's really tough, I think it's good they put a Dragon-type leader so recently before him, as it helps to try and direct the player to finding a way to deal with the type, and doesn't make it feel relevant to the rest of the story by having more dragons to slay not long after. This fight also probably has the best song in the entire game. It's epic and invigorating, has your heart pounding out of your chest. There's something so poetic, especially in retrospect, knowing Tajiri thought these would be the last Pokemon games. having to slay dragons in order to reach the top, like all those old school RPGs he clearly had an affinity for. Also, check out the most I shouldn't be alive moment of all time right here. The ending is really sweet, and though when I was younger I thought Elm should be here with you instead of Oak, there is something so special about the first character in the series most players ever interacted with also being the last one of the main story. And yes, main story. There is an extensive post-game ahead of us, but let's take a breather for a second, dude, calm down. It starts with Elm giving you a ticket for a cruise ship to Kanto, specifically Vermilion City, and Oak gives you the national dex. I know everyone knows this now, but Kanto not just being Route 26 was a real surprise to me as a kid. I saw you going to Kanto for the champion bout more as a formality and that'd be it, but no, you get to explore all of Kanto now, and take on all 8 gyms from the original games. And I mean all of Kanto, as this part of the game is something the remakes drastically improved on from the originals. I've tried to not make this review so much of a comparison between them, but this is the shining example of how the DS games blow the original ones out of the water. While yes, Kanto was in the Game Boy games, it had to be very condensed in order to fit on the cartridge, and gave us what I affectionately refer to as the mini-golf version of Kanto. Look at Viridian Forest. They Loraxed it. In the remakes though, it really is all of Kanto, like the quality of what a full DS remake of Gen 1 would have looked like. It's really something special. And something really cool is that by messing around a bit and doing a couple things out of the expected order, you can also challenge the gyms in their classic order as well. In Pewter City, this guy will give you whatever box legendary item you didn't get before, and this is the way it was in the originals, but it's still really weird to me that they did it this way in the first place. They at least put him up on this raised platform here in this version, but he's still just some guy. Also in Pewter, there's this little detail I really like. Back in Red and Blue, this kid would complain about being scammed into buying a Magikarp from the salesman near Mount Moon, and that NPC is still here, and now if you talk to him, he'll talk about his Gyarados. Love stuff like that. Speaking of the Silverwing though, this part of the game also makes tons of legendaries available. You can get Lugia for starters, but there's also the legendary birds who become available pretty quickly. Moltres is in the final dungeon, and Articuno is in the Seafoam Island still, but Zapdos is just hanging out in front of the power plant. I get that's where he was before too, but he was like nested inside of it. Here he's just leaning against the building like he's a greaser outside the local 5 and dime. If you encountered him all of the required story times, you can finally catch Suicune too. The battle was originally in the Bell Tower, which I think was probably cooler, but with the Ho-Oh story changes here, I get why they moved it. Feels kinda weird he's just out in the open like this though. I also never mentioned the roamers. Entei and Raikou can be encountered and caught as soon as you see them at the Burn Tower for the first time. I've always found this mechanic annoying, because it basically results in most players just going in and out of the same area to find them quicker. It's cool on paper, but I think it just doesn't really play out all that well in the gameplay. Also, thank God the birds aren't roamers like they were in Sinnoh. Playing up to this point, I totally thought they were, and was relieved that they're chill like that. Outside Pewter are also these meteors, where you can change the form of Deoxys you have. It's cool they included these things in the games at the time, but I don't think they really ever made Deoxys available frequently enough for it to be all that useful. Which is a shame, he's really cool, he's probably my favorite mythical. Though I guess he's not necessarily a mythical anymore. There are a couple more legendaries, but I'll get to them in a bit. At Mount Moon, you run into your rival again for a fight, and somehow actually still isn't the final one. Great jump scare material though. You can find him 2 more times. First is at Dragon's Den where he's training, and get to do a double battle with him against Claire and Lance, which is just really awesome. We're going to take a short break from talking about him though and get back to the Kanto stuff for a bit. By the way, flying from one region to the other is a bit weird. You have to go to the edge of either map to the Pokemon League, then fly again to go somewhere in that region. I don't really get this decision. I'd understand if it was a technical limitation, but no, when you're there you can fly anywhere in the world. The Kanto League is fun, nice and brief, not a ton of story restrictions to take them on, with Team Rocket gone again. There's this one guy though who never got the memo who's pretty funny. You just chase him for a minute and battle him so you can return something to the power plant, and that's about it. I know it's a common complaint Kanto has no story, but that seems a bit cynical to me when it's just not really about that. Some of the gyms got redesigns, which I'm all for. Some of the originals were pretty lame. Erica's new one is still kinda boring though. Of all the ones not to redesign though, why on earth would they choose to keep Sabrina and Surge's the same? These were easily the most lame, mindless puzzles in Kanto and are left totally intact. I don't get it. I think my point here is that even though they were memorable, that doesn't make them good. Although Blaine's gym is definitely a step up from Crystal's, it's still a bit disappointing to me the trivia game is just completely gone. I like that one, but I guess it never really communicated fire in the first place. Speaking of, it's a nice touch that significant events have transpired in Kanto as well since Red and Blue, like Cinnabar Island burning down, forcing Blaine into the Seafoam Islands. I mean, it's sad, but cool. Could have used some burn heal. Something else that's neat is with Koga now a part of the Elite Four, his daughter is Fuchsia's gym leader now. In fact, there's a bit more to all the gym leaders now, even the Johto ones. See, while the story here isn't as overt as the Johto quest, I think it's a bit disingenuous to say Kanto has none. It's just more passive and about observing how things have changed. I feel like this criticism only really sticks if you're assuming someone's never played a Kanto game, which, to be fair, is a valid point. I just don't think a majority of players will feel cheated by this trade-off though, with this post-game still being so grandiose. After getting all 16 badges, you can find the gym leaders out and about, get their phone numbers, and actually rematch them just like the trainers. You can even trade Pokemon with some of them, which I didn't know before. Jasmine just gives you her Steelix, which is hilarious. Another thing worth mentioning is the Battle Frontier just past Olivine. This place is focused on highly competitive battling, either with your own Pokemon or rentals. To get the rewards from doing this, you need to win 100 battles in a row in the Battle Tower, which I have come to find out is much harder than it sounds. In Platinum, I hardly ever touched this mode, it just didn't interest me. But as an adult, I see the appeal, the challenge, and the reason so many argue about if it's cheating or not. Not that far into a win streak, the fights get much tougher, and by the time you're only in like the 40s, several trainers start using teams of optimized Pokemon with perfect IVs, legendaries, and optimized legendaries. This was easily the most difficult part of this playthrough for me, and took my playtime from around 40 hours to over 90. So what are these rewards you get for completing a 100 win streak? First, for completing a 20, 50, then 100 streak, you get trophies that appear in your bedroom. You can't do anything with them, and you can't interact with them. Second is another star for your trainer card. It's bragging rights. I think the Battle Tower is really cool in concept, trying to get players into much deeper strategic thinking and giving them a place to experiment with it outside of a proper competitive setting. But I think the fundamental flaw with it is that it's supposedly a skill-based mode that just has so many luck-based factors affecting everything. Whether you'll get a critical hit, whether you'll get a status ailment, whether your item will activate. There were several times I lost or even won where it didn't really feel like it was influenced overly by my actions. The other modes are neat, but none held my interest. The tower is the real star of the show here. Speaking of, I mentioned the Pokeathlon and National Dex Stars before, so let's cover the last one. This one is funny to me due to how effortless it is. When walking with a Pokemon, depending on its nature, you can sometimes find shiny leaves while talking to them in the tall grass of specific routes. They're pretty rare and you have to find them in a certain order as well, but if you just look up the corresponding ones based on your mon, it's like 20 minutes tops to find them all. Once you have all 5, you can take them to Lyra, or whatever the boy counterpart's name is, and they'll turn into a shiny leaf crown, and that gets you the star. I wish there was any indication for this even being in the game. I don't know how you're meant to learn about them, and Lyra even sort of misdirects you. She makes it sound like it has something to do with the friendship stat, but it apparently has nothing to do with it. It's just a matter of if the Pokemon is in a good mood or not. After beating all the Kanto gyms, you can enter Cerulean Cave to battle Mewtwo, who's been bizarrely neutered in this version. His moveset is a massive downgrade from his Fire Red and Leaf Green one, making him much less of a threat. This, with the ability to get as many Dusk Balls as you want, makes him one of the easier legendaries to catch during the adventure. He's still really cool, but he doesn't really feel like that super boss he once was. Beyond this, you can also rematch the Elite Four for much tougher battles. At Indigo Plateau, you can run into your rival on Mondays and Wednesdays for a repeatable final battle. It's a good fight and he has a great character arc. Over time, realizing his attitude and training is his problem, and learning to really love his Pokemon. He's a really great foil for the player. He also has a Crobat for his final bout, which is a happiness-friendship evolution. Such a great thematic touch. And there's even more to his character than just what you can experience in the main game. Earlier I mentioned some important story content becoming inaccessible due to only being doled out through events, and unfortunately some of that has to do with the rival. In the Celebi event, it was officially revealed Giovanni is his father, which prior to this was mostly just implied. This is why I named him Luca. It's Italian, like Giovanni's name. Like, I get by this point it wasn't some massive mystery, but why couldn't this scene have just been in the game? It's so weird. He's really cool though, and is among my favorite characters in the series. After the battle, he wishes you luck against the Elite Four. I love you. Like I said, this time around they're much tougher, and each get new Pokemon from Hoenn and Sinnoh, and by the end, Lance's strongest team member is level 75, which is crazy. After you have all of the badges, Professor Oak will open the ways for you to Mount Silver, the final dungeon of the game. It's a cool location sort of inherently, but I think the approach to it is really underrated. All through the game have been these bustling Pokemon centers, full of silly NPCs, then you get to this one, and it's totally empty. It's a bit chilling, it's awesome. The loneliest Pokemon center in the world. Into the cave, this is where you can find Moltres, really secluded. Poor guy is always getting evicted. From Victory Road, from the Sevi Islands, now here. Also want to mention that while training up in Mount Silver, my team caught Pokerus, which is just insane, yet I never encountered a shiny besides the guaranteed one. But look, that's cool and all, but let's get to the main event of Mount Silver. Red. Coolest battle of potentially the entire series, with some of the highest leveled Pokemon ever seen from an NPC outside of the battle frontier. The aura is insane, man, and they even cranked it up from Gen 2, with instead of him being in a cave, now being on top of the mountain. Literally the peak. The battle is phenomenal, but there is unfortunately one thing that sort of drags the moment down, and that's the stupid decision to make Rock Climb a required move to get to him. There's no way around it, meaning you have to either forfeit one of your team members' moves to make room for it, or even worse, forfeit an entire team member to bring an HM Mule along. So lame, but nonetheless the absolute coolest moment of the entire game. It's also this amazing sense of closure, with being able to go to his house in Pallet, just left in this deep uncertainty of what happened to the real champion. I used to wonder why they never did this sort of thing again with like the other protagonists, but as cool as it'd be, now I can see why they don't. It'd sort of diminish how special this moment is. And when all is said and done, the player gets the true ending. But what if there was a post game? So, after defeating Red, a few more things open up. It's just a game that keeps on giving, man. Returning to Professor Oak, he'll give you a Kanto starter, which is really cute. Even further though, you can see Steven from Hoenn, who will give you one from there too. I think this was one of the most awe-inducing moments for me as a kid. I didn't grow up with the Hoenn games, I started with Sinnoh, then got Fire Red, so it was always the mysterious region to me, so having a starter from there was just so magical. You can actually meet Steven earlier in the post-game in Vermilion City, where Latios or Latios, pending your version, will become a roaming legendary. This is the Pokemon I tend to use my Master Ball on. The Hoenn stuff doesn't stop there though. I didn't know this as a kid, I thought it was an event thing, but you can go see Mr. Pokemon after beating Red to get a special orb item. Off of Route 47 with Rock Climb, you can reach a secret cave where once you have the item, either Kyogre or Groudon will become available. This was my first time doing this, and it was just sort of surreal finally seeing this location after seeing it in images for so many years, because honestly it's cool, but also kind of looks like the most fake fan-made thing of all time. Non-derogatory. It surprises me it's only level 50 though, as by this point, having beaten Red, I can't imagine most players' teams would have something that low level. Like, that's weaker than most of the Kanto Gym Leader's Pokemon. You can trade over the other version's legendary to get an orb from Oak to battle Rayquaza, but I'm not dealing with that. It is weird to me though, the decision to lock this behind beating Red. It's definitely cool, but doesn't really feel like it tops Red, not even close. They should have just made this another thing you get for getting all the badges. And that's about it. That's the majority of the content in these games. As a sequel, I think the original Johto game set the bar to an impossibly high standard the vast majority of games wouldn't even consider attempting to rival, or even feel they could. And then with Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I think they set that bar again for remakes. It's no wonder they felt the need to just reboot the series after Gen 2. It's hard to see how they could have topped it, so they didn't even really try. Honestly, actually finishing this game makes me feel sort of sad. I think it always does in RPGs, particularly those with some sort of post-game, as it doesn't leave you on a the end screen to dwell on. It's fully your choice to turn the game off for that potentially last time. It really does feel like saying goodbye to your home at the end. So, all I guess there is left to say is, thank you, Pokemon Heart Gold, for the adventure.